Okay, so we all know the story of the boy who lived, right? But what about the story of the book that lived? Today we're going to dive into the absolutely wild journey of Harry Potter's reputation, how it went from a manuscript nobody wanted to a global titan that even the snobbiest critics had to pay attention to.
Just to wrap our heads around how huge this whole thing is, let's start with a number. 216,500. Any guesses? Well, that's roughly how many Harry Potter-related things you can find for sale on Amazon right now. And I'm not just talking books and movies. We're talking wands, Lego sets, even stuff for your pets. It's a whole universe.
And all of that, it all started from just one book. The very first one, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, has sold over 120 million copies worldwide. Let that sink in. And that's just book one. I mean, those numbers are just staggering, practically unheard of in the history of publishing.
So you have to ask, right? How on earth did this happen? How did a debut novel about a boy wizard, written by a single mom, become this cultural juggernaut that literally redefined an entire industry? To figure that out, we have to rewind all the way back to the very beginning, when, trust me, success was anything but a sure thing.
Because here's the crazy part. Before it was Harry Potter, the global phenomenon, it was the book nobody wanted. And you really have to get this part of the story because it shows just how close we all came to never even hearing about Hogwarts at all.
So, J.K. Rowling's manuscript? It got rejected. A lot. Like somewhere between 8 and 12 different publishers said no thanks. When a small publisher, Bloomsbury, finally took a chance on it in June of 1997, that first print run was just 500 hardcover copies. 500! And get this, 300 of those went straight to libraries. Yeah, not exactly what you'd call a blockbuster launch.
So what was the turning point? How did it finally get its big break? Well, the story goes, the chairman of Bloomsbury gave the manuscript to his 8-year-old daughter, Alice. And her review was simple, powerful, and pretty much perfect. She told him, "Dad, this is so much better than anything else." That was it. That little bit of feedback from its actual target audience was the spark that lit the whole fuse.
And Alice's reaction? Well, that was basically a preview of exactly what was about to happen. See, the initial explosion in Harry Potter's popularity wasn't driven by some big fancy marketing campaign or a bunch of 5-star reviews from critics. Nope. It was a total grassroots movement, a groundswell of excitement that started with its youngest readers.
The book's first real validation came from awards like the Nestle Smarties Prize in 1997, where the winners were picked by kids. So while the adult reviewers were still kind of scratching their heads and trying to figure out what to make of it all, the kids, they already knew. They got it. This was something special. They were the ones telling all their friends, "You have to read this book."
And man, this thing grew fast, like unbelievably fast. By 1999, the hype was so real that bookstores in Britain deliberately released the third book, Prisoner of Azkaban, at 3:45 in the afternoon, specifically to stop kids from skipping school to buy it. Just a year later, the midnight release party became a cultural ritual. That's when it stopped being just a book series and turned into a full-blown event.
All right, so the UK was completely hooked. The next big test was America. Could the magic of Harry Potter really translate across the Atlantic?
Well, the American publisher Scholastic was betting big that it could. They bought the U.S. rights for $105,000. Now, that might not sound like a ton today, but back then, for an unknown debut children's book, it was an absolutely massive number. They saw the potential early and went all in.
And that bet included one of the most famous edits in modern publishing history. Scholastic worried that the word philosopher in the title sounded a little too academic, a little too stuffy for American kids. So, with a bit of reluctance from Rowling, they changed it. And that's how the Philosopher's Stone became the Sorcerer's Stone.
And the title wasn't the only thing they translated. The first American editions had all these little word changes to make them feel more familiar. A jumper became a sweater, chips became fries, mum became mom. It's kind of fascinating to look back on. Apparently, Rowling later regretted some of those changes and had a lot more say in stopping them in the later book.
So, did the bet pay off in the States? Oh yeah, big time. It was a complete and total explosion. The books didn't just top the bestseller lists, they completely took them over, squatting in the top 3 spots for weeks and weeks and kicking out all the big adult fiction writers. It got so extreme that in the year 2000, the New York Times, the gold standard, had to literally create a brand new, separate list just for children's books, basically to give anyone else a fighting chance.
So, at this point, Harry Potter is a certified pop culture earthquake. But as its popularity hit a fever pitch, a whole new battle started brewing.
The world of serious, highbrow literary critics, well, they couldn't ignore it anymore, and a lot of them were not impressed.
Now, before we get into the fight, let's just quickly clarify what we mean by literary criticism. This isn't just about someone saying I liked it or I didn't. It's the more formal academic process of judging a book's artistic value. Its themes, its writing style, and its place in the grand tradition of literature.
And at first, the mainstream reviews were actually pretty great. Michael Weinerip, writing for the New York Times, captured the feeling perfectly. He praised the characters and said that even with all the magic, the story felt human and real.
But then came the backlash. When Prisoner of Azkaban was being considered for a major UK literary prize, a critic named Philip Hensher just went for the throat. He wrote this scathing piece calling the Harry Potter phenomenon a sign that culture was being dumbed down, an infantilization of art. His message to the adults reading it was blunt: grow up.
And Hensher was definitely not alone. This pushback came from all over. You had literary critics calling the series formulaic, saying it wasn't prize-worthy culture. You had famous academics like Harold Bloom who met it with outright scorn, seeing it as a symptom of cultural decline. And on another front, you had religious groups trying to get it banned from schools over the whole witchcraft theme. It was a war on multiple fronts.
So, where does all this leave us? You've got a book that's beloved by millions, yet dismissed by many of the traditional gatekeepers of high culture. This whole conflict really forces us to ask a much bigger question. What makes a book important, and who exactly gets to decide?
I love this one metaphor a scholar used, describing a book's reputation as being like a stew. It's not made from just one single ingredient. Its flavor comes from a mix of everything: professional reviewers, academic scholars, teachers, librarians, and, of course, millions of readers themselves. And in the case of the Harry Potter stew, you definitely have all those ingredients in the pot. But what makes its story so unique is that one ingredient was just way, way more powerful than all the others: the children. The kids who read it loved it and demanded more. In the end, their voices were just louder than any critics.
Ultimately, the story of Harry Potter's reputation is about so much more than just one book's success. It's really about a shift in cultural power. It leaves us with this huge question to think about. Can a book that inspires an entire generation to fall in love with reading redefine what a classic is? Not by the judgment of a select few, but by the overwhelming love of the many. What do you think?